From Alameda, California, the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Flying High Over the Zone with the Zigzag Man.
I am back, and you are flying high with me, the Zigzag Man, over the zone in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco in the northern part of the great state. And I'm blessed. I have a guest in the studio. We're just going to do a few moments, a little update on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. It is a year ago to the day when the lovely and provocative Talie Olson and I sat and conceived the idea of, with the help of Wayne Unger and a few other folks that were in on it, conceived the idea that we're going to have a network. And it's been a year. Talie's been a sponsor of the show. She makes soap, and more than that, she's the kingpin of the show. Every decision I make, I talk to her first, and she's terrific. So welcome back to the airwaves, Talie. How you doing?
I'm doing good tonight. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to make it clear that without you, there is no Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And that's all I want you here for. So that's it. That was it. I'm gonna give you guys a little rundown of the programs that I have set up. I'm real proud. I want you to know that we have 12 weekly podcast shows and 4 or 5 shows that contribute on a sporadic basis. It's not a right or wrong. So what I'm going to do is run down the weekly podcast shows and tell you a little bit about each of them, and invite you to go to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network website. It's comfortablyzonedradio.com, and you can check out all the shows, bookmark the ones you like, and share them with your friends. In no particular order, first, I've got an A's baseball, past, present, and future. My co-host for this one is Billy Martin Jr., whose dad was instrumental in Billy Ball, great Yankee manager, great baseball manager, and Billy in his own right is a player rep, a marvelous storyteller, a raconteur of his dad's accomplishments and the life and times of his dad. It's cool working with him. Another show we have just finalized with John DeQuisto, according to Fastball John. And John is a former Major League player. He's an artist, and he's inordinately articulate. He will be doing a show on the network that is basically a commentary. Another show we have, Charlie Vasilero's Baseball Emporium. Charlie is a Renaissance man, and I just invite you to check out. He's had 3 shows, plans another one later on this week, and he's terrific. David Nemec's Old-Time Baseball History and Trivia. David and Alan Blumkin, who is my all-reliable Tommy Heinrich on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. He and David share a weekly show where they talk about old-time baseball history and trivia. Check that one out. Check out Dodger Baseball, A Tale of Two Cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. Dodger Baseball is hosted by Peter Trunk, co-hosted by Ron Rabinowitz of Jackie Robinson fame, and Bernie Rose of jazz musician fame, blues musician, an accomplished blues artist, and Linda Wilson makes an occasional appearance. She is a Los Angeles Dodger aficionado. And on to the next show, we have this one, Flying High Over the Zone with the Zigzag Man. And I am a he. And my show basically is what it is. And a lot of sports, a lot of politics, a lot of me blabbing, a lot of me talking to a bunch of folks who are amongst the most interesting on the planet. And I enjoy doing it. I do it on a weekly basis. And on to the next one, Genesis with Ian Kahanowitz and Mark Weiss. Ian had Genesis going on his own network for a long time, and for one reason or another, took a hiatus. He's back, and I'm fortunate enough to have secured a working relationship with him and put him with Mark Weiss, the pinch hitter of the network, the rusty stop, if you will, and they're terrific together. I talk on Saturday nights with Tim Haller, son of Tom Haller, who was a catcher, later a coach, a general manager with the Giants, big league catcher for a lot of years with not only the Giants but the Dodgers. Timmy, in his own right, was a minor league player with a fast track to the majors when he suffered a disabling injury. And he has stories to tell. He's one of the most interesting, friendly humans I've ever met, and we've been doing the Giant podcast all this year and loving it. We talk about past, present, and future New York Giants, and I just want to interrupt my little show because Talie wants to say something, and when Talie wants to speak, she gets to speak.
Ralph, I just wanted to say that thank you for honoring me the way that you have throughout the whole process of the show developing, which has been wonderful to see. It affects a lot of people very positively, not just the people that are listening to the show, but the people that are involved in the show now. It's wonderful to hear them talk about what it's doing for them. So it's all positive, and it's getting bigger all the time, and it's very exciting to see it. I'm very happy to be a part of it. So thank you.
What a supportive sweetie. I'm not all that surprised by that. Thank you, honey. You're a doll. Onward, I want to keep this real short because in the second segment, I have an interview that I recorded with my great godfather. Now, that's a long, we will talk about that. I have a godfather, Tony D'Angelo, and his godfather is Bob Lazzari. And Bob and Tony have been two of the people who are instrumental in the success of my putting together the network. And so let me go on. This is very thrilling for me because I could not have done this without the people I've mentioned, and I'm so absolutely indebted, grateful, and happy to be putting the word out as I am and getting my feelings out about it. And there you go. Next show I want to talk about that we have on the network is one that I started just about a year ago with Peter Golenbach. He wrote, among other books, Dynasty, Bums, The Forever Boys, just 7 or 9 New York Times bestsellers. He's inordinately articulate, and we have a panel of folks who come in and talk to him. Amongst others, we have the 3 baseball Meshuggahs who get together, Alan Blumpkin, Peter, and I. And we have guests. We talk about the times, and I'm honored to have Peter as the host of Golenbach University, we call the show now. And it's fun to do. I do that once a week with Peter and Alan Blumpkin. Another show I do, New York City baseball, past, present, and future. We basically have 2 segments. We have a Yankee segment, and we have a Mets segment. The Mets segment I co-host with a fellow who was in my 2nd grade class, Marty Rose, my best friend growing up, an original Met fan like myself. We played hooky in 1964 from Newtown High School to go to opening day at Shea Stadium. 19 of us, something Myrtle tell you, in the neighborhood played hooky to go to that. And we've been talking ball since we were 10 years old, 7 years old probably. First baseball card I ever saw was in Mert's house. It was a Sally Hemus baseball card. It wasn't a Topps card. It had the television set outlined to it. And Sally, I remember that card very distinctly. We've been buddies all from way back, and we have a great rapport on the air, and I'm privileged. Mert is a maven as well, and just to be doing this, the Met part of New York City baseball with him is terrific. I mentioned Wayne Unger before. He's a big part of the Yankee part of the segment, as is Alan Blumpkin, old reliable Tommy Heinrich type guy. Speaking of Alan Blumpkin, we have a show with Hal Bach. It's called Talkin' Hoops from Nedick's at the Old Garden on 48th Street. We talk old-time basketball. We're all 3 New Yorkers, and we go way back, and these 2 guys are mavens, so I get to learn from them. I know a little bit about it myself, and another comparatively new show to the airwaves that I have a lot of fun doing. A show that I get a lot of satisfaction of having on the network is one called Weighted Donuts with the aforementioned Wayne Unger. And Weighted Donuts was named after his favorite player growing up was Ellie Howard. And Ellie Howard invented literally a weighted donut that goes around the baseball bat that makes it heavier in pregame warm-ups, and when you're on deck swinging a bat that's weighted, you take the weight off, you have a lighter bat. And so in deference to him and his terrific career with the New York Yankees, the show is named Weighted Donuts, and Wayne talks baseball, talks with some of the most prominent sports writers, columnists in the country, and his co-host is Craig Spear, who in his own right is a baseball maven. I never pronounce the name right. It's Steer. And if I get it right, if I get it wrong, somebody in Cleveland dies the next day. That's another inside joke of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. So tune in to those shows. And next week I'll give you a little rundown about some of the shows that we have that aren't weekly but are very, very important to the network. And now I'm just going to close it out by telling you to hang in there for a second. We'll play you some bumper music and throw it to an interview that I so much enjoyed doing with Bob Lazzari, who is a East Coast broadcaster and my great godfather. You'll hear why. Enjoy, everybody, and Talie, thank you for being here. You're terrific.
Thanks. I happen to live here, so it all worked out very conveniently. So.
Isn't it nice? Isn't it nice when the studio is right in the bedroom? Wow, I'm having a good life, ladies and gentlemen. Here's to you. Catch you next week, and enjoy Bob Lazzari. He is absolutely terrific. Bye, everybody. I am back, flying high over the zone in Northern California, Alameda, MI. I'm Ralph Tycho. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I do a weekly podcast that is fun for me. How about that? And the reason it's fun is that I have interesting and passionate guests, and I have one today, and we're going to talk a little ball. Bob Lazzari returning to these airwaves, as it were, and I'm happy to have you back, Bob. How are you?
Big, I appreciate you having me. It's been probably a couple of years, but enjoy your work, and Happy New Year to you, and thanks for having me on.
My absolute pleasure. I think since you've been on, I made my podcast into a sports and recreation radio network, the Comfortably Zoned Network, and I've got a few shows. Mostly it's the inspiration, believe it or not, of you and your partner, Tony D'Angelo, who's turned into my godfather. You guys have been instrumental in starting this thing, getting me some guests, and some who have turned into co-hosts who have joined the network, and I'm really appreciative of all the help you guys both did. Tony declined today. He wants it an all Bob Lazzari day, and in a way that's good. I can't wait for both of it. I can't wait to hear the dynamics again on these airways of both of you together. Tell me about the show you guys have been doing in Connecticut for a while now. a podcast show, much like myself, a little more fancy, a little more tech. How'd that get started?
Actually, Zig, it's a local TV show here. It's shown throughout Eastern Connecticut, and when we get professional ex-pros from any sport, which is 90% of our guests, we will upload it to YouTube, and that's been our kind of our shtick, is to get a lot of these pro guys that maybe not have gotten the credit they deserved over the years, and they may not be in the greatest demand at this point of their lives, but they're so appreciative that someone like ourselves recognizes their exploits in the past. So they're really, really interesting people to talk to. But we do it every other Monday night here in northeastern Connecticut, and they show it every Monday night. So it's a double play of the live show. We just did one last week where we had Matt Barr, who was an NFL kicker for 17 years. He was our guest on the last show. So that'll be shown again this coming Monday, and then we'll do another live one on the 23rd. But it's our 10th year, and again, we try to stay seasonal, Zig. Starting January, February, we'll get the baseball guys coming on when spring training starts, and it's been a good combination. And Tony, as you know, is the more historical kind of person. I'm more of the day-to-day follower, and the combination seems to work.
Beautiful, it does. Who is your favorite guest of all time? If you had to get,
wow.
I mean, just when I say not because he was your favorite person, because, oh my God, what a coup, I'm talking to blank, blank, blank.
One of the more impressive guys I think I've ever spoken with, and there's been so many. I'm going to say Dr. Bobby Brown, the former Yankee. And because I just don't think Ziggy probably got the credit he deserved as far as accomplishments, not just on a baseball field, but what he did in his life. This was a guy who was obviously a very accomplished baseball player, and went on to become president of the American League, went on to be a medical doctor. I mean, think about what this guy did in his life.
He was a heart doctor, for crying out loud.
Yeah, right. And to be that versatile and to be able to tell us so many stories from different facets of life, he was very fascinating. And but he's probably one of the first ones that comes to mind because of his resume was so incredible. And you're talking to this guy, and you were just impressed so much by what he did. But we've had guys like Bob Seagren from the '72 Olympics telling us about Munich. It was pretty intense stuff, Zig, but so many to mention, Hall of Famers in various sports. I remember, as far as on the hockey side, Brian Leach seemed to be one of the more incredibly nice people you'll ever speak with. And that's the kind of people we like to get, and we try to share those people among certain shows because we know they're dependable and they're just hell of a nice people.
Yeah. Hockey players are generally nice guys. Just they leave all of their anger and out on the rink, and they just seem down to earth to me, more so than most athletes that I've interviewed.
I think that's a great point, Zig. Because we haven't had too many hockey players. I mean, we are so inundated with basketball. Well, I'm going to say football and baseball mostly. But we had Bernie Nichols. He was another superstar, probably should be in the Hall of Fame. We had him on about a month ago. And you're right. I mean, very down-to-earth, very calm. It's almost like they left all that on the ice, but incredibly well-spoken people who took their sports serious. And he was one of the ones I remember also. And very, hockey does not have that kind of tension that the other sports have, and it's sad because guys like him who gave their heart to that sport for so many years just did not get the payoff that these other guys did.
Yeah. Well, get back to Bobby Brown for a moment. You were nice enough to refer him to me way back, and I did an interview with him as well on the Peter Golenbach show on the station. And I'll tell you what impressed me, as it did with people like Clem Labine, that one can get into their 90s and have all all of their wits about them. Dr. Bobby Brown was as sharp as a tack. So was Clem Labine. I could think of others. I think we had Hobie Landreth on. He was that way. People stayed pretty sharp, and it's an inspiration. I'm no spring chicken, and I want to go into my final years, keeping it together. And there are a lot of people that don't have that. And when you see somebody that is so sharp that makes you think, well, life can be really worthwhile when you have your memories and you have, you're not, you might be old, but you're not elderly and what have you. It's an inspiration, and Dr. Brown was just that. What a guy. When you were a kid, you mentioned that you were a Giant fan more than any other team.
I was, Zig, and people always would ask me when I was a kid, everyone, of course, around here, as you know, they're either a Met, Yankee, or a Red Sox fan. And when I was a kid, I remember I was about 8 years old, and I asked my father one day, and here I was just getting to follow sports, probably in the late 60s when I became aware of people and superstars, and the interest was growing because my father was a maniac when it came to sports, and I owe everything to him. But I asked him one day, I think I asked him, Dad, what do you think is the best pitcher in Major League Baseball? And he didn't hesitate. And at the time, he said Juan Marichal. And when he said that, Zig, I started following him, and then I started following the Giants, and I just became an incredible fanatic. I remember even in the early 70s getting the only paper in this area that had the late box scores, the New Haven Register. There was a New Haven Journal-Courier, and there was a New Haven Register. The Register is the one that came out in the afternoon, and that would have the late box scores. I would get that paper. I would cut out the box scores. I would put them and the headlines in a scrapbook, whether they just their wins. Just the wins. I try to forget about the losses. But I kept that for years. Of course, was a big baseball card collector. And I remember my father did take me to Shea Stadium to see Marichal in the early 70s, and I think he squared off against Seaver. Now, there's a matchup for you. But that was probably the highlight of my life. And here I was 10 years old seeing these two guys, and of course I didn't know until my later years how great these guys were, and what kind of experience that was. My father probably paid $10 for the tickets at the time, but as you know, it's changed a lot. But yeah, that I followed the Giants pretty close, I would say, for about 20 years, and then I just became so disgusted, Zig, with every year the Giants, they'd have a decent offense, but Horace Stoneham just refused to start spending money to get some good pitching in there. And then when I, of course, started covering sports myself, I kind of had to take a back seat. I find it very, very more relaxing and more satisfying, believe it or not, to not have any dogs in the fight, not have any favorite teams. And some people can't relate to that because they're maniacs around here when it comes to baseball, Yankees, Mets, and everything. But I feel as if you could watch any game with a neutral mentality, it's so much more enjoyable, and I'm enjoying sports now more than I've ever done as far as viewing them.
Well, you can root for players that you like covering rather than because they're on a specific team. And sure, as hard as you try to be neutral, if somebody gives you a hard time on an interview or it just isn't courteous or this, that, and the other thing, you're not going to have that rooting interest for them, and that has to shine through. You may be a reporter, you may be a journalist, but you have feelings, and I think players don't realize that. Like, they wonder why at the end maybe they come short Hall of Fame ballots, this, that, and the other thing. A lot of it might have to do with simple human interaction with the people that they're around. Nobody wants to root for a red ass if they're a jerk all the way, no matter what their statistics are. And that alone could influence Hall of Fame, Most Valuable Player awards, all that stuff. Who are some of the people that you'd like to see in the Hall of Fame coming up, the Hall of Fame vote coming up, and who are some of those that you still haven't come to terms with in the Hall of Fame?
Well, Zig, big news in this area because he pretty much was from this area and he went to high school in this area is Jeff Bagwell. And he is your typical guy that has been included in the quote-unquote steroid age. Put him in the same pot with the rest of these guys. Now, Bagwell is one of these guys that never got caught, not that we know, never tested positive that we know. But, of course, being aligned with all those guys who played in the era, and, of course, I'm the first. I don't feel sorry for any of these guys because the union of which they were a part of was it was basically the biggest cover-up since Watergate. It was just I can't feel sorry for any of these guys that they may fall a little short, not get in my lifetime, whatever. But Bagwell is one that comes to mind. I'm at the point now where, if the guy didn't test positive and you're only going by speculation, maybe there's some talent in not getting caught. I don't know how we would put that. But Bagwell, the numbers are astounding, Zig, if you check them out. And I guess with the Connecticut Roots, I was more as far as in tune with what he was doing on a year-to-year basis. Probably the Red Sox getting rid of him was the worst thing they ever did. But he's the first guy that probably would come to mind. I don't know, what do you do with a guy like that?
Where does the rumor come in, other than just guilt by association? And if you want to put everybody in that category, then maybe everybody like Clemens and Bonds, maybe because they played against the people of their own era. There is a rumor that the Hall of Fame is switching, that the voters are switching ideas and about to let people like Bonds and Clemens in. And I want to know, was there one thing that put Bagwell in that group, like I say, other than just everybody else might have been doing it? Was there a rumor, like with Piazza, he had acne on his back, and some reporter, I think it was Milton Gross, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know if that name is accurate, just reported that, and for 2-3 years he didn't get into the Hall. Is there something holding Bagwell up? Like I say, he was never caught, but were there strong rumors going on?
Not that I ever heard, Zig, and that's what kind of makes it all a little more foggy to me. I do think, and I don't want to go out on a limb and say, I do think he wasn't the quote-unquote nicest guy out there as far as media-friendly.
Okay,
perhaps
going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Right. So
yeah.
In that case, I'm not going to say he was bad. I never had the opportunity to speak with him. I mean, here in Connecticut, we have a Sports Writers Alliance. We've, in the past, here's one example. We've wanted him to receive one of our prestigious Gold Key Awards. They give about 4 out every year to people with Connecticut roots who deserve them. And we've tried to establish him as one of our inductees for a few years now. We can't get any response from him or any interest in him showing up, and I think it may not just be us. It's one of those deals. And I also think, if you look at his numbers, they are so ridiculous. Figure between like 94 and 2001, the numbers are consistently, he's over 110, 120 runs batted in. And I think another thing they look at, he basically never, ever missed games. So people were thinking, there's no way you can play 162 games for like he did for almost, my goodness sake, if you look at the numbers, 9 years in a row, I don't think he missed more than 3 or 4 games. It was ridiculous. So I think there's it is all speculation. and his numbers were gaudy. Combine that with the era he played in, he's got these things going against him. But again, I think maybe it may not be this year, maybe not be while you and I are on this earth. I do think, though, what you said, I think a lot of these guys with new voters and new mentality coming in, all of these guys it's going to come to a point someday where they're going to say, well, the pitchers that a lot of these guys were going up against were probably doing roids also, and we can't prove it, but so let's put them all, let's just finally go back to the stats, and a lot of these guys will get in, I believe.
Well, like I say, it's interesting that Bonds and Clemens, the pitcher, are the two poster children for it, which means that there had to be other pitchers as well. You got Pettit came up as someone who tested positive. Is there going to come a time where they just start taking people from the era and we can't compare era to era. We can't compare Bonds to Musial and Cobb and Williams and say, well, who was the greatest left fielder that ever played? And then you'd have to throw Ricky Henderson in. But we can't do that anymore, and that's what makes me most angry. Another thing that makes me angry is what you mentioned, union collusion. And not because there wasn't an opportunity for the unions and the owners and the players and the trainers and everybody to make many, many more bucks than they were making before. But the baseball union has become one of the strongest unions, probably the strongest union in the country. If they can't take care of the well-being of their players beyond the financial part, and what I mean is they're covering these players, they probably still are, maybe, but certainly were, covering up for players, telling them when there'd be piss tests, enabling them literally as enablers, but giving them the idea that, sure, you take some steroids and what's it going to do, this, that, and the other thing. Still has not come to light the long-term effects. The people like Lyle Alzado, who developed horrible problems in their physical problems in their life from taking steroids. So if the unions are working in the best interest of their members, they certainly fail from that standpoint because, it's easy for me to say because I never had the money and I never had the chance to really make big, wow, if I did this, I could really make big money. Is it worth it to put a needle in your ass because we know how steroids, long-term effects of people taking steroids and steroidal drugs, cortisone and this, how that could, and whatnot, that does deteriorate your body. It does cause your kidneys to fail and your lungs and your system. So is it going to be worth it long-term when you find a lot of early deaths because of it? The jury is still out, I guess. But in a sense, it's ruined the game from the standpoint of being able to compare eras. Does that mean what we saw didn't really happen when Bonds was in such this incredible groove of never being struck out, never missing a pitch, this, that, and the other thing? Had to be steroids affecting it. But you could say the same thing about Clemens, who had his best years at a time when, generally speaking, late 30s, pitchers go downhill. So makes it tough from that standpoint.
As far as one more thing, as far as what you mentioned Bonds and Clemens, and I'll put even A-Rod in that group. I think most of us think that a lot of these guys, those aren't the only three, but these guys could have made the Hall of Fame on their merit without the steroids, and that's the sad part of it. Their name is going to be smeared till the day they go to the grave. Although we live in a very forgiving society, if these guys had come clean early, like, say, a guy like Giambi did. Giambi, at the end of his career, and here in New York, he was actually almost revered for his honesty, Zig. So, but these guys never got it. And when you think about it, Bonds, Clemens, and A-Rod, probably three biggest egomaniacs we'll ever come across. So I think there's a kind of there's a definite connection there to what they did, why they aren't liked, and it's just sad in a way because it could have been totally different, and their lives probably could have been much happier people, I think.
Right. And then it came down to the dynamics of the United States Congress as being judgmental on baseball, which you start to think about it, they may have had some other things on their mind, and and who's going to judge the Congress? But and the absurdity of that trainer getting up, and Clemens, says his wife was taking steroids, and Brand McGuire is, I'm not here to talk about the past. It comes up. It just put these people in a light that was so negative, and it's, but you have to say after the strike that baseball needed the home runs, they needed the publicity, and some will say that the McGuire-Sosa hopped up race for 60 home runs and then 70 home runs. That could have saved baseball. And what also gets me, I'll make my final point on steroids and let you have what I call the last word. I didn't call it that before. I just started calling that a moment or so ago. But I forgot my final word. You take the last word on steroids. How about that?
Well, I think you just put it all in a great basket right there, Zig. I mean, nobody should be at fault. The owners, the commissioner, they all knew this was going on. I mean, until you ask Tony D'Angelo about it, he says, you're not going to tell me these guys went into Joe Torre's clubhouse and were doing this thing and Joe didn't know about it. I mean, come on.
Or Tony La Russa's clubhouse, for crying out loud.
Oh, come on.
I mean,
yeah,
Dusty Baker's clubhouse with the Giants and Bonds.
You would think Canseco would disappear with McGuire into the stalls, but turn your head. We don't care what they're doing. They knew what was going on, and they were probably scorched. I mean, this is good for the game, I think when you said about do they care what would happen to these guys' health after they're gone? I know a guy that got to play golf with McGuire a few years back. He said the guy could not even bend over to get the ball out of the hole, Zig. So I mean, it is incredibly sad. And again, it's not the player's fault, but how much money is enough? And they're all in the same boat.
That is really in life. How much money is enough? I mean, we were in the world of politics. We the people complained when we were governed by millionaires. We thought it wasn't fair. This isn't going good because how can a millionaire represent Johnny Lunchbucket and have empathy for their problems and know what it's like to get on the MTA, for instance. Now we're governed by billionaires. If we thought it was bad before, it's getting to the point where leadership in all aspects of life are so out of touch with their workers. CEOs make 45 times more an hour than their workers. We have a terrible imbalance between the rich and the poor, and it comes down to that one word that you used, is greed. How much money is enough? How much wealth, and how do we measure wealth? And should we be measuring wealth by in a different way, just not by money? And should the poor be those left out of the pension plans, for instance. Tony sent me an article the other day about the response of the current union to the needs of those players who are indigent, making way for BATS, which is basically a charity. Shouldn't have to have a charity. So much money to go around. They can look back to the history and see if players like Carmen Fanzone, who missed the pension by weeks and weeks,
right,
don't get taken care of in some way. It's a bad world in a lot of ways, and grievous.
Your blood boil when you just speak with it. You're right, Zig. We talked to Fanzone at length a few times on the TV show, and every time there's a very successful guy who made it out of baseball, a very accomplished musician, et cetera. But that's not the point. You could tell every time we talk about it, his blood boils for guys that may not be in as decent position as he is. It is so sad. And Tony came up with a kind of a nice solution. He says, can you imagine if these baseball players out of 162 games, if they all agreed, and this would have to go through the union, and that's why it would never happen, but if they all agreed to take 1 day's gate out of the 162 games, 1 day, just 1 day, Major League Baseball's gate, and to donate it to these old players who are struggling, it would kind of solve the problem, Zig, but they won't go for it. And that's how you hit it on the head. It's a bad world out there.
Yeah. What are you going to pass on to? Do you have children, Tony?
I do not.
Okay.
Zig. Believe it or not, I went 55 years without getting married, without getting divorced, and without having children. Maybe I do it on purpose to stay busy. Maybe I was educated too much. I don't know. But, I've been scathed up to this point.
Okay. What would you pass on to as Casey used to call them, the youth of America?
Interesting question, because I do work with special ed kids during the week also, Zig, and talk about it's not a good world out there. What I would still pass along, even though it is being looked down upon and not stressed like it was when you and I grew up, was a sense of discipline and responsibility that's going away, even at the most elementary levels. Let me give you an example about some of the school systems here in Connecticut, Zig. They have this thing, and it's ironically, they call it, quote-unquote, mastery, the mastery approach. What that means in a nutshell is that kids are no longer able to flunk or fail. It is that trophy mentality. Everyone gets a trophy. But as far as in the schools, you do not have to pass tests anymore. What happens is if you flunk a test, and, of course, knowing that these kids, even at 8, 9, 10 years old, knowing this, they go into it kind of like the cat ate the canary. So they do not study for tests or whatever. That translates into bad behavior in the classroom. What happens is you'll get the tests back. The teachers will get tests back, and these guys are not putting up 50s and 60s. They're in the 20s and 30s, and they give them back to the kids with open books and say, just keep taking it until you pass. Now, let me ask you, what is that teaching society? That's teaching them no discipline, no responsibility. So we're fighting an uphill battle here. And so, I mean, I was brought up in a very, very disciplined background. My father was an old Navy guy, but it has to come from within, too. What I would just try to pass on to some kids to get that, and you know the technology age, too, Zig, these kids have no interpersonal skills. That bothers me. They can't look at you during a conversation. So I would stress the need for, like Bruce Springsteen said on so many occasions, that human touch. It's lost on a lot of people. And discipline is kind of a lost art. And it may sound strange to guys our age, but pretty sad.
Yes. I'm afraid. Do you have fears or just trepidations over the next 4 years of government?
I don't think I have fears, Zig. I mean, it's interesting. Out of all, I was a journalism major, and at Fordham, which is known for their journalism schools, and all of our idols.
Vince Scully and Frankie Frisch.
Hey, yeah, and people ask me from time to time, what was the best course you ever took while you were in college? Well, believe it or not, it wasn't in my major. It was, I think I was a sophomore. Here I am, 19 years old. I took an elective introduction to American politics, and the guy that was teaching the class was, he was a hardcore radical type guy, and I'm saying to myself, this ought to be interesting. He came into the class with army boots on, and you could tell he was, and you'll see him on CNN once in a while when they have political discussions, but basically what I took out of that class was how dirty the entire political business is, and how in our lifetime it will never get clean, and how little that you, Joe Lunchpail, have to do with the entire process. I got a very, very disdainful feeling for politics before I hit the age of 20. So, it pretty much, to me, Zig, it doesn't really matter who's in power. I understand the system, how dirty it is, and, to say that my life was terrific these last 4 years would be a long shot. So again, I don't spend my whole days on social media. These people that are thinking the world's coming to an end. You're going to wake up, you're going to put 2 feet on the ground, and you're going to try your best on your own without the help of any government running your life. And that's how I kind of approach my daily grind.
Well, that's a good positive attitude, and I'm sure the less time one spends even thinking about things that are out of their control, the better off they are. Because some things we can do things about, and some things we can't. And accepting what battle you're going to fight and the reasons you're going to fight that battle, that'll be good in today's day and age. That'd be a good reason to have a battle. That's how you have to look at it.
There's people out there, Zig, that they're under the impression that their lives are ruined for the next 4 years because of the results of one election. And I can't wrap my arms and hands and mind around that, but it is what it is.
Right. We'll see. Tony, will you come back from time to time on a more regular basis? It's been, like you say, about a year and a half, and Tony, I called you instead of Bob.
Two-headed monster here.
Absolutely. Come back with Tony next time so I don't get to screw up like this again.
No, absolutely. No.
If for no other reason.
I love the shows that go a little beyond the sports, but pretty much can talk about anything. And, when you have kind of a 15, 20-year resume of talking to some great people in the sports world, you like to share with others and bringing back some memories of maybe some of those athletes that people say, oh, now I remember him. He was a great player. And that's what I think we love doing. And Tony will be the first to tell you, we would be enthralled to come on your show at any time.
Oh, man. I'm glowing. Let me just say that. Tony, I did it again. Bob, I'm going to end the show the way I generally do. I'm going to implore you and everybody out there to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your children out of military recruiting stations, and your grandchildren, too, because that could ruin your family in a hurry. And got to say it, you got to keep your kids off the laps of clerics that wear dresses, just to be on the safe side. Not everybody is that way. Not every cleric is that way, but just be safe. And if you do all 4 things, and if you keep on keeping on, life will be, if not great, a little better, got to say that. And you enriched my Saturday morning, Bob Lazzari.
Appreciate that. And same here, Zig. Again, I love coming on the show, and what you do is it's very unique and very welcomed.
I appreciate that. Hearing those words from you means a lot. Thank you, sir.
Have a good day, Zig.
All right. Everybody, see you next week. Keep on keeping on.